was doing on that front, to working through the process of can I become an administrator, and growing in the confidence level to know that he could be an administrator and that he had the skills to do that, and do it justice to become a great administrator. So he's in his first administrative role right now, and that's why we wanted to bring him back so he could make an easy connection to you. So from J.T. Lambert Intermediate School in the East Stroudsburg School District, I give you Tom Tancin.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be back here because it's been about 3 years since I was here at Summit. I was here as a lead learner until 3 years ago. But it's been 8 years since I was sitting where you're sitting right now as a KTI star. I was a KTI star in 2016. Woo! And in 2016, I had no idea I would be standing up here giving a keynote at Summit. And I know that, and actually at that time I had no idea I was going to be assistant principal either. And I know lots of people say that, right? They get up and they say, oh, I never imagined I would be doing this, but I'm going to give you 2 quick stories, examples of why I never was going to do this. So, KTI 2016, that summer at Summit, the first night of Summit, that Monday night, I wanted to go home. I almost quit Summit. And I'm going to share that story of like why that happened and then how I got past that. But like if you're thinking you're going to leave Summit, you're certainly not thinking you're going to keynote Summit, right? That's a big jump. And then a few years, it wasn't even just 8 years ago. A few years ago, I was here as a lead learner, and John Meehan was giving his keynote speech, and he's amazing. And he was doing gamification, he gamified his classroom, amazing work, and it inspired me. I ended up doing a lot of gamification that I'll talk about in my story. But he was giving his keynote speech, and in that moment, I was sitting in the back as a lead learner, and his parents were in the audience. And he was talking about how special it was for him to be able to, it was how special it was for him to be able to have his parents there and actually see his keynote and how he was sharing his passion with the people that were here and doing what he loved to do. So, for me, I was sitting back there and I was like, I was so happy for him, right? I was happy that he got to share that moment. But for me, it was difficult because at that point, I had lost my parents. I lost my mom I lost my dad when I was 25. I lost my mom when I was 32. And so at that point, I was sitting there going, it's great that they get to be there and I'm happy for them and I could see the pride. They were beaming with pride for him. But in that moment, I was sitting there going, it's a good thing you're never going to give a keynote because you're never going to be able to have that moment with your parents there to have that pride. And that's short-sighted because it was never just about that keynote. It was about all the things that they were going to miss, right? But in that moment, that's what it was about. It was like choked up, I was tearing up. So when I say I never thought I was going to give a keynote, I really mean I never thought I was going to give a keynote. And when Scott reached out to me and asked me if I would keynote Summit, and he said the team was talking about it, they said that I had a story to share, I was like, how can I now go and give a keynote when I thought I was never going to do that? Right? That's something I was never going to do. But I knew that I did have a story to share, and it was about the fact that I went from someone who wanted to quit Summit the first day or 2 that I was here, to being a lead learner, to then getting to be the point where I'm being asked to give a keynote. And I wondered, what was it that actually got me there? Like, what changed? What was that magic moment that happened there? And it was more than one moment. And then also, how did I end up as an assistant principal? Because that was not on my radar. And what I came up with as I was reflecting, and I'm going to share with you today, is I'm calling it the power of purple. Because KTI was that spark. The magic of KTI is purple, and it was the spark that got my journey started. And it gave me all of what I needed to be able to do this. But what I realized too in my reflection, as you're going to see, is KTI doesn't give you attributes that you have, or doesn't give you attributes that you don't have. It takes the attributes you have and it magnifies them. It amplifies them. right? It finds your core and it amplifies who you are. KTI didn't give me the attributes that I have, but it showed me that I have them, and then it amplified them so that I could use them for leading and doing well for students. So I want you to take a few moments, and I was trying to think, like, where do I start with this? Like, how do I start my keynote, my journey here? As I told them, I'm like, well, I might as well start with when I became an educator and why I became an educator. So take a couple of minutes, talk with your table mates, and just to share, if you haven't already, but if you have, refresh real quick. When and why did you decide to become an educator? Just talk amongst your table.
I didn't want to be an educator. I did it because I was going to be a geologist, and then I double majored, and I was like, yeah, education classes, and I wanted to work out, and I left. Because I had to.
Other days. Simple, it's just so simple. But I started just making feel comfortable. I started doing things. Yeah.
I wanted to coach because I think sports really being involved in it work out for you. And I wanted to kind of, and I also wanted to time certain
Give me a dry erase.
I always liked books. Anytime my parents went to school, most of them shut me down. So I always loved books. In 7th grade, I had a teacher who used to say that.
Yeah.
She was so good. In 7th grade, I was an English teacher. So I kept going all the way through high school.
My high school, our last month of school was we had senior project and it was to go out and do a job at say we in 8th grade. In 8th grade, I went to a law firm, my aunt's law firm, and that was kind of cool. And then my senior year, they actually asked me to come back. And I instead went to my old elementary school and was like a pre-student teacher.
All right, so I know I'm gonna cut your conversation short.
I was a nerd. I always wanted to be a teacher.
I hope that you will continue to have those conversations going forward. But to summarize it, just a show of hands. So how many of you said you became a teacher because of a teacher? Okay. And how many of you said I always wanted to be a teacher? All right. So both of those things were true for me. And so when I came home from school, the very first day of school, I said to my parents, I'm going to be a teacher. And my mom never let me forget that. And it actually never changed. The only thing that changed about it was that every grade level that I went to, that was what I was going to teach. So 2nd grade, I was going to teach 2nd grade. And eventually when I got to middle school, I fell in love with science, and I was like, I'm going to be a science teacher. And I ended up going on to be a biology teacher. So I would even come home from school, and I would play school, and my parents would almost like reprimand me. They'd be like, do something different. You're at school all day, and then you're playing school all night. And I would get the neighborhood kids in, and I would make them students, or even a couple of them to be teachers. But that was like what I did as a kid. So it was one of those things that I just always wanted to do. And then along the way, I met some really great teachers. And I had, in high school, in middle school, my English teacher challenged me to write a book. And I started writing a book, and I wrote 11. So teacher did that, right? They inspired me to do that. And I was like, I just want to be a teacher for that reason, in addition to I already wanted to be one. In high school, my dad was battling a debilitating lung disease, and my parents were wonderful. My mom was really stepping up to be the support system for the family. She was taking care of my dad, she was taking care of my disabled brother, and she knew I could handle my own. So she would support me, but I was kind of on my own, and I was stepping up to kind of support as well because that was needed. And when I would go to school, in high school, I had teachers that I would go talk to, and I would unload all that pressure and all that responsibility and all that stress so that I could go home and do that again. And teachers do that, so that was something that resonated with me and continued me on my journey. So then I went to school, I went to college to be a teacher, obviously, and when I got to college, when I said I never wavered from being a teacher, that wasn't entirely true. So the semester before a student taught, in one of my education classes, I had to teach a lesson, and in front of my peers. And at the end of my lesson, my professor critiqued it, and in front of my whole class, he said, "You're never going to make it as a teacher." He said, "You don't have it in you. You're too reserved, you're too shy, you're too quiet." In front of everyone, right? This is the guy that's supposed to help me become a teacher. He's telling me I'm never going to be a teacher. So I was embarrassed, obviously, and my whole life was shattered because I'm like, this is all I ever wanted to do, and now he's telling me I can't do it. I went home to my parents and I said, I'm leaving the program. I can't student teach. He's going to come out and evaluate me. He's going to fail me. He already sees me as someone who can't be a teacher, so I'm just leaving the education program. But I didn't know what else I wanted to do because I always wanted to be a teacher. So I was like, I'm just going to drop out of college. And my mom, being my mom, heard me out, talked me through it, and she's like, well, I know you're going to make the right decision, so I'm going to support you in whatever you do. That was how my mom operated. My dad got a hold of this, and he was like, you're not dropping out of college. I was the first person in my family on either side that would be able to be possibly graduating from college. So he was like, I want this to happen. And he just wanted me to have possibilities that my parents didn't have. So I didn't make any rash decisions. I thought about it, and I decided I always wanted to be a teacher. I wasn't going to let one person, one opinion, tell me that I couldn't be what I wanted to be. And if he didn't think I could be a teacher, well then he was just going to have to fail me. Because I'd be at the same spot I was at that moment, but I wasn't the one making that decision. It would have been on him. So I went on the next semester, I student taught, and he came out the first time for my first evaluation, and I was super nervous because I'm like, I'm going to fail, this is the end. And at the end of the lesson, he said to me, we need to take a walk. And I was like, oh boy, this is the end of the road, right? I'm in trouble. He said to my co-op, can you teach the next class? Because I want to talk with him. So we went for a walk, and it was quiet. Like, he didn't say anything for a while. We walked down the hall, down the steps, we went to this little lobby area. And the first thing he said to me was, I want to apologize to you for saying you would never make it as a teacher. Because he said, when you were standing up there and you were working with those kids, you were a totally different person, and I now see it. And I'm sorry that I said you wouldn't make it as a teacher. So I went on to get a long-term sub position at the one school that I student taught at. I ended up as a permanent position at the other school that I student taught at. And I was a 7th grade science teacher. That was my classroom. And so fast forward a few years, I'm teaching 7th grade, and I decide I want to incorporate this thing into my classroom. How many of you know what this is? Okay, good. So I was like, it's so outdated at this point. But why do I have a Nintendo Wii in my Keynote in 2024? Because it's like almost 20 years old at this point, and even when I was a KTI star in 2016, it was already discontinued. But this is one of the reasons why I think I ended up at KTI. So I wanted to have a smart board in my classroom, but they didn't have any in the building. They had some in the building that were being used, but no extra, right? And They didn't have the money to buy one. So I was like, I'm gonna figure out how I can get a smart board. I can't afford to buy one, but maybe I could figure something else out. I did some research and I realized that you could take a Wiimote and just poster paper and infrared markers, which I bought on eBay, and you can make a smart board. And so I made a smart board in my classroom. And in addition to that, I was doing project-based grading in my classroom, project-based learning, I was doing standards-based grading, or at least interested in it. And my principal came to me in early 2016, he said, I nominate you for KTI, for Keystone Technology Innovators. I had no idea what that was. No one in my school had been nominated for before that. And I was kind of shocked. I'm like, why am I nominated for it, right? Like, I just was doing what I was doing. I didn't see it as something that was innovative to go on to KTI. He said, I think you should apply to go to Summit. So I applied. And then to my surprise, I was accepted to go to Summit. And I was like, I don't really think I'm doing anything that innovative, right? Like, I don't understand why I'm going, why me? I'm just doing what I do and what I think is the best for kids. So I just want you to think for a minute to yourself, why did your principal nominate you for KTI? And then what innovative project or practice did you use in your application?
Mainly because we ate scratch.
Just thinking for a moment to yourself. At some point, I think it would be great to share this with your people, by the way. Like, share it out at the time. But for the sake of time of the keynote, I'm going to just have you think about it for yourself for now. Because here's the reality. Here's the reality. Your principal who nominated you saw that, right? They saw some innovation, they saw something in you that said you should go to KTI. And when you applied, the lead learners who look at applications, they saw it as well. So what I'm saying to you is you have to recognize in yourself, because if you're like me in 2016, I didn't recognize it. And there's probably some of you sitting here that don't recognize it, maybe most of you sitting here don't recognize it. But you have to see it in yourself because other people are seeing it. Your principal saw it, the lead learner saw it. So I was in for a rude awakening when I showed up. Woo! I had no idea what to expect, and what I learned soon after was that no one knows what to expect at KTI, and you probably recognize that as well. So the day I show up, my car gets attacked by Verno, and they steal my belongings. And I'm thinking I made the biggest mistake of my life. Because I'm super introverted, super shy, super quiet, and I'm now in KTI that's the complete opposite of that. And so I need a warming up period. You don't get a warming up period in KTI, right? So that first night, after dinner, I tried to connect with some people, didn't really connect, I was having trouble, I was really feeling out of my element, and the writing was on the wall. I'm like, I just can't be here. This is not right for me. Right? I don't fit in here. So I was like, I'm going to go home. I'm going to come up with some kind of excuse. And to be fair, it wasn't just KTI that was part of it. Like, I had just lost my mom 2 months prior, and I was dealing with, I had been married for about 5 months at that time, and it was already breaking down. So there was a lot going on in my personal life, but then I show up to KTI, and I get in an environment that's not for me, right? At least I thought. But then I started to think to myself, you know what, that professor told you can't be a teacher, and you said, yes, I can, and you did it, and look what happened, right? He ended up telling you you were right and he was wrong. And this feeling is a feeling, but why are you letting that feeling stop you from something? Like, your principal nominated you, they selected you to be here. Why are you letting yourself say, why are you letting that self-doubt and lack of confidence tell you you should go home? So I was like, all right, fine, I'm just going to stay, I'm going to stick through the week. And I'm glad I did. That week, Aaron Sams was a keynote speaker. He's a flipped classroom guru. He was all about flipped classrooms and standards-based grading. And he was talking about it. And someone in in our crowd of stars asked him, well, how do you do standards-based grading in a traditional system? I was hooked. This was my hooking point because I was already interested in standards-based grading. I had researched it, I had went to see schools that were running it, but I was in a traditional system and I had no idea how to make it work. And Aaron Sams said, don't let a traditional system stop you from doing something new. That was a simple statement, but it wasn't. And it meant a lot to me as I was sitting there and I was like, I'm not going to let something in a traditional system stop me from doing something new. And I made a vow to myself right then and there that I was going to run standards-based grading the next school year, that coming school year. It also didn't take me very long to meet my KTI crew, my cohort. One of them's a lead learner this year again. Macer was 2016 with me. And we ended up having a lot of fun and learning a lot. And what happened over the course of the week is we connected and I realized, you know what, they're innovative, they're passionate, they're dedicated, they want to learn and grow and they want to do great things for students, just like me. And they have resilience because we shared stories about how much we all had to overcome. And I was like, these people are just like me, but it's not just my little crew, it was the whole group of stars that were just like that. And I've never been in a place where everyone was like me. Like I was never in a room that was so passionate about education as I was at KTI Summit. So I left KTI feeling, when it had started off, I left feeling inspired. I was inspired about teaching, I was inspired about learning, I was inspired about standards-based grading. I was ready to go. So I know it's Wednesday, it's not quite the end of the week, but how many of you are feeling inspired and re-energized or getting re-energized at this point? All right, so most of you. And how many of you are exhausted? Yeah, that's absolutely true at this point, right? That's a given. But it's what you do with that inspiration that you're getting, right? It's rejuvenating you, it's re-energizing you, it's what you do with it that's going to matter. And so I left Summit feeling that inspiration, and I went home and I spent the remaining weeks of summer creating a standards-based gradebook in Google Sheets. I was like, I have a traditional system, but I'm not going to let it stop me. I'm going to find a way to make it work. And I did. I created a Google Sheet gradebook for standards-based grading, and it actually worked out. When I was done, I went to my principal and I said, you sent me to KTI, here's what KTI inspired me to do. I want to run with this. And he said, I think it's great, but this is a huge change. I think you should get permission from higher up. So I tried to get a meeting set up with the assistant superintendent to get approval, but it was coming up on the first few weeks of school and it was really busy and I couldn't get a schedule. So I had to kind of put my plans on hold. But the thing was, that resilience in me that I had now identified because of KTI, I was like, I'm not giving up on this. Like, I might have to put it on hold, but the fire wasn't getting extinguished. So that next spring of 2017, this was the assistant superintendent at the time. I screenshotted his tweet. He tweeted out in the spring of 2017, he said, I really admire those innovative teacher leaders who embrace competency-based grading over statistical averaging. Why do I have to go meet with him to get his permission? He just gave me permission, right? This is public. I screenshotted it, I was like, go ahead and call me in and tell me I'm doing something wrong because I've got the screenshot of the tweet. And he said it was okay to do. So the following school year, I was like, I'm going to do standards-based grading. I'm just going to run with it. And also they had put out a call for lead learners for KTI for 2017, and I was like, I would love to go back. Remember, I wanted to leave, but I wanted to go back because I wanted that inspiration. I wanted to go back and get re-energized. But then I thought, there's no way they're going to accept me. Right? There's hundreds of stars every year that go on that could be lead learners, and I'm like, I don't have that personality. Like, I'm introverted. I don't have that overwhelming, energetic, great stuff, and that's just not me. Right? I was like, I don't even want to be there at first. So I let my self-doubt tell me I'm not applying, and I didn't apply. But the next school year, I ran with my standards-based grading in my classroom. And when they called for lead learners for 2018, I said, you know what? you keep letting things stop you, but every time you don't let it stop you, it works out for you. So I went and I applied to be a lead learner, and to my surprise, I was accepted to be a lead learner, and I was on staff in 2018. And as a lead learner in 2018, I presented about my standards-based grading and my grade book and how I was grading with Google Sheets, and that gave me the confidence to go on and do that at my professional development for my district. And then with the encouragement of the KTI family and the people that I was connecting with, I eventually went on to present at P&C. And this confidence kept growing in me. And so for the next few years, I was a lead learner, I was giving presentations at my district in-services, I was presenting at P&C various presentations of things that I was doing in my classroom. And in 2018, I started to think where I was in my career and where I wanted to go. And what I realized, because I was given the chance to work with educators and show them what I was doing, and then hearing them talk about what they were going to do, because every time somebody shows you something they're doing, people take it and they do something with it and it goes a step further. And it was that satisfaction and fulfillment that I was seeing from people doing that, and I was just like, I really like this. It's like, I think I need to go into educational leadership. I need to lead people so that I can help them grow and do great things for students. So I went to Lehigh for my Master's of Educational Leadership, and my colleagues were like, you're going to the dark side. You're going to the dark side. By the way, I still was not thinking assistant principal. I was thinking curriculum and instruction. Right? I was going actually to be supervisor of curriculum and instruction. They're like, you're going to the dark side. One of them said, you're such a great teacher. Why are you leaving the classroom? One of them even said in a group, they said, I'm willing to sacrifice Tom for the greater good of students and staff. My colleagues saw going into administration as the dark side, a sacrifice, and that you're too good to do that. And I'm thinking, don't you want the best people doing that? Like, shouldn't the best people be leading? It doesn't make sense to not have that, right? So, and then I went and I came up with this, and I was like, you know what? It might be the dark side, okay, fine, I'll even agree with you. Maybe it's the dark side, but I'm a KTI star, and I'm gonna brighten it up with my light, right? So, and the thing was, lots of KTI stars ended up doing that. And lots of them went into leadership, and so now you have all these innovative, passionate people going into leadership because of KTI, with the power of purple. At the same time, I was taking the work of John Meehan that I learned through presentations and books that he wrote, and I was gamifying my classroom, and so we were doing escape rooms, we were doing egg hunts, and my students were loving it. So I started to present that instead of standards-based grading. Oops, that went too far. And I went to P&C in 2020. Yeah, 2020, February of 2020. And we were there, and one of my fellow lead learners, who happens to be in the room today, said to me, you have a biology background. Do you have any concern about this virus that's in the news? And I said, I'm really concerned about this because it's acting in a strange way. It's very, very contagious. There was a lot that I was concerned about. And when I left P&C, I got sick, really sick, laid up for days. And then, just about a month later, March 13th, we shut down. And education stopped, the world stopped, and teachers were asked to do something that they never had to do before. We had to educate students from our house while they were in their house. And in my case, and I'm sure for many of you, we didn't even have our students on Zoom. It was like, give them work to do. Well, that's great. It's not really teaching them, it's not helping them. So I was going to teach ecology at the time, and I thought, I'll find videos that will help them understand the concepts of ecology. But I couldn't find anything that I really liked, and I was like, my students learn best from me. I'm their teacher. I have that connection with them. So I need to make videos for them. And I decided that I had taken students as a middle school teacher out to the environment to learn about ecology. I was like, well, I'll just bring the environment to them. I'm not going to school every day. I'm stuck in my house. So I'll just go hike in the woods and I'll film videos and I'll take that to my students and give that to them to watch. And I use things that I learned through KTI and P&C, various audio recording, video recording tools, green screening, and I put together some videos for my students. I always thought we should teach ecology outside. in the actual environment. But it's almost impossible to take 150 students out every year. So now that you're learning virtually at home, and I'm teaching you online, I can actually make this happen. I can teach you ecology from outside here in the environment. So let's get started. And then, I wanted to teach global climate change. And I wanted to talk about the greenhouse effect. And I was like, what better way to give kids an example of a greenhouse effect than in a greenhouse? But where was I going to get into a greenhouse in the middle of the pandemic? And not even the middle, the beginning, everything was shut down. So I was like, well, good thing I was a KTI star and I learned about green screening. If you've ever been in a greenhouse like this one, you know that it can get quite warm in here, even in the winter. You also know that it stays quite warm even overnight when the sun goes down. That's because the sun's energy comes in as light and then it gets trapped in here. The heat gets trapped, it can't escape. This is great for... So I went on to present about those videos that I was creating when we had KTI again in 2021. And I was then on board to be lead learner again in 2022. But at the same time, as I was finishing up my master's and I was about to go into my internship, I had agreed to be a lead learner, I was on board, and I had also been hired by Johns Hopkins Center for Talented Youth to be an academic dean. Well, I couldn't do both because they overlapped in the summer. And I had to go to Scott at PEC in 2022, and I had to say, I know I committed to being a lead learner, but I got hired to be an academic dean, and I think that's the right step that I need to do because it's going to give me some hours for my internship and everything that I was going forward with. And the reason I'm saying this, and Scott, I hope you don't mind I'm sharing this, but is because I think it's going to teach a lesson. Scott said to me, I'll never forget it, he said, well, you go do what's best for you. You're part of the KTI family. You always have a place here. You can come back. That's the mentality of KTI, right? I'm backing out of a commitment that I gave, and I was told, you have a place here. You can always come back. Go do what's best for you. Go do great things for kids. So I went on to Johns Hopkins Center for Talented Youth, and they had just returned in the summer of 22 from the pandemic. And we were hit with tons of challenges. And so we had students that had to isolate, staff that had to isolate. We had staff that didn't even have the right clearances for Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania has the clearance, thing that people out of state didn't necessarily have. We had the mental health issues of students who just were at home for so long. It was challenge after challenge after challenge. But I had the power of purple, that resiliency, the innovation, the collaboration, all the stuff that I learned through KTI, and I was able to help lead with Johns Hopkins. And what I realized as I was leading staff was that I love the academic dean role. So I was trying to figure out what is it in the public school system in a school that I could do that would be equivalent, would be the closest thing. And I realized it was an assistant principal, which I never wanted to do. So last summer, as I was acting as academic dean, I applied to be assistant principal. I interviewed, and I was hired by East Stroudsburg Area School District to be assistant principal for J.T. Lambert Intermediate School.